going to just take a few minutes to review some of the things that we said last week, particularly for some of you who weren't here. I want to mention that we talked about the causes of death that are related to alcohol. And those causes have included lung disease, including lung cancer, which is the #1 cause of death from cancer in the United States, 90% of which is tobacco related. The #2 cause, right close to it, is heart attacks, and heart attacks and cancer each kill about the same number of people each year in the U.S. And then after those three come high blood pressure and strokes. And strokes take about 150,000 lives a year. And so those three major causes of death are tobacco related. And the CDC, the agency that tracks mortality causes in the United States, you may have heard of the CDC. It's an organization located in Atlanta, Georgia. They say that 1/3 of all deaths in the United States are tobacco related.
1/3?
1/3. And there are about 2 million deaths annually in the U.S., and about 1/3 of those are tobacco caused. Wow. And so we're talking about a very major problem. When I was a teacher at Loma Linda University Medical School, the dean of the school came to me one day and he said, "Carl, we are now having questions asked on national board examinations about nutrition, and we have no nutrition in the curriculum. We do not teach doctors about nutrition." And so he said, "I wonder if you would be willing to take a sabbatical and get a master's degree in nutrition and come back and develop a nutrition curriculum for our medical students." And that's how I became involved in this subject. And so I went to UC Davis, University of California, Davis in Northern California, and did a master's degree in nutrition. And I've told you some already about some of my experiences there. Davis, as you know, is perhaps the leading veterinary school in the United States. And it is a school that specializes in the health of animals, particularly dairy animals, beef animals, chickens, and all of the kinds of meat that we eat so much in the American diet. And so it wouldn't be hard to estimate that the faculty at Davis is pro-animal nutrition oriented. You all follow that? If they weren't, they wouldn't be at Davis, would they?
Well, that school wouldn't be open.
That school wouldn't be open. And yet it is a major school in the United States for the training of veterinary physicians. And in fact, while I was there, 2 of the faculty members in the nutrition department were editors of the leading nutrition journals in the United States, the American Journal of Clinical Nutrition and the American Journal of Nutrition. Both of those had the editor on the faculty at UC Davis. And so that school has been a champion of nutrition for many years. And they have developed a number of really important nutrition research successes. But it's interesting that if you follow the line of reasoning that is prevalent in the United States, you will find that every nutrition advisor in the country tends to start out by saying that you need a lot of protein. Protein is very important in the diet. Mm-hmm. And where do you get protein?
The logical thinking in today's society is meat.
That's right. You get it from meat. And you get it from dairy products. And you get it from eggs. Mm-hmm. All of those have a very high quality of nutrition, protein, And therefore, those industries tend to focus on promoting those foods in the American diet. And so we talked about the American diet the last time we were here, and we contrasted it to a diet that is based upon plant foods and animal foods, okay? The American diet is based to a large extent on animal foods. The diet that we're recommending here is a plant-based diet. Now, the difference between those two diets, to summarize very briefly again, was that the American diet has about 50% of its calories from fat and about 20% of its calories from protein and the rest from carbohydrate. Those are the three major food groups: protein, carbohydrate, and fat. We mentioned that carbohydrate and protein each have 4 calories per gram. Fat has 9 calories per gram. So fat is twice as potent as a calorie source as either protein or carbohydrate. And so that was the American diet. Now, we mentioned earlier that 6 of the 10 causes of death in the United States are nutrition related. And how are they nutrition related? What do people die from in the United States?
Cancer, obesity.
Cancer, heart attacks, strokes, Alzheimer's disease, suicide, auto accidents, and that's most of the 10. We didn't include autoimmune disease, which is another major cause of death. Okay, so we want to leave that now, and I want tonight to talk about the role of vitamins in our diet. What are vitamins? What?
Are they an enzyme?
No. Vitamins are chemical substances that are necessary for life. If you have a lack of any vitamin, you can die due to a vitamin deficiency. Yeah. And so vitamins are very important. They're essential for good health. And there are 2 classes of vitamins. There are the fat-soluble vitamins and the water-soluble vitamins. The fat-soluble vitamins are vitamin A, vitamin D, vitamin K, and vitamin E. Those are the 4 fat-soluble vitamins, and we're going to talk more about them in a minute. The water-soluble vitamins are vitamin C and the 8 B vitamins. Vitamin B1, thiamine, vitamin B2, riboflavin, and so on down the list of the B vitamins until the last one is B12. Okay? We already talked a little bit about B12 the other night. So now, let's look at each of these vitamins and talk about how they function in our body and how a deficiency of them is manifested and how and where they come from. Where do we get those vitamins? Okay? Are you with me? Yeah. So remember, I said if you aren't following me or if I'm saying something with 75 letter words instead of words that you can understand, please stop me and raise your hand, because I have a tendency sometimes to use words that are too big, and my wife reminds me of this all the time when I talk to my kids, and I use these words like choleric and neuropathy, and what is that? And so please stop me if I do that. So vitamin B12 is the first one we're going to talk about. B12, the chemical name of it is cobalamin, and it is the most complex chemical of any of the vitamins. It is so complex, in fact, that it has a molecular weight that is higher than any other vitamin that we have, and it is a very complex chemical that is necessary for the formation of blood cells. Have any of you ever heard of pernicious anemia? Pernicious anemia is due to vitamin B12 deficiency. And it is a type of anemia where the red blood cells that are made are too big. They're macrocytic red cells. And so vitamin B12 deficiency manifests itself by anemia. It also manifests itself by damage to the nervous system, particularly to the spinal cord. I want to tell you about a patient that I had not too long ago. This man had become a vegan, and he had had no animal foods for a number of years. And he came to me because he was developing weakness. He could hardly stand up. He could hardly walk. And when I examined him, I found that he had partial paralysis of a number of his muscles. Now, that man's disease was due to vitamin B12 deficiency because he was eating a vegan diet. A vegan diet does not contain vitamin B12. It's the only vitamin that is necessary from animal products. You can't get it from a plant. It comes only from animal products. You can get it, of course, in a pill, in a bottle, and if you are a vegan, you should be on one of those bottles. Because being a vegan without taking a B12 supplement will result in exactly what this man had. And he was partially paralyzed because of damage to his spinal cord from B12 deficiency. Okay, so B12 is, its function then is it operates in cholesterol metabolism in the body. It also is very important in protein metabolism, and a deficiency of it leads to pernicious anemia, and the absorption of vitamin B12 is very complex, requires three factors that are substances made in the stomach and that are necessary for the B12 to be absorbed in the small intestine. And if you lack those substances, and one of those substances is called intrinsic factor, and it's made by the lining cells of the stomach. If you lack intrinsic factor because of a disease in your stomach that has caused the lining of your stomach to atrophy, you become B12 deficient because you don't have intrinsic factor that is necessary to tie up to the B12 in your diet and allow it to be absorbed in the small intestine. And it's absorbed only in the distal part of the small intestine. Your small intestine is 30 feet long, a very long pipe, and it has three sections. The first part is called the duodenum, the second part is the jejunum, and the third part is the ileum. And those three segments of the small bowel function differently. We talked a little bit the other night about gluten enteropathy. You remember that? And we talked about how gluten enteropathy occurs because the lining of the small intestine loses its little villus projections, which are like little fingers that protrude into the lumen of the bowel and increase the surface area of the small intestine tremendously, from a few square feet to the size of a football field. And so if you have loss of those little villi, you aren't able to absorb nutrients, many different kinds of nutrients. Yes?
What types of behaviors or diet factors or lifestyle contribute to losing those little fingers in your intestinal tract that make up such a large mass of a football field?
Well, we don't have time to talk about that tonight, but it includes a number of different autoimmune diseases. You've heard of celiac disease, you've heard of gluten enteropathy, and there are a number of other diseases of the small intestine. Crohn's disease, a type of inflammatory bowel disease. All of these diseases can cause loss of the ability of the small intestine to absorb nutrients.
I guess I was maybe just looking for one or two reasons why that might happen, Doctor. snacking meals, or would drinking soda pop, or we don't have time?
None of those things.
Oh, okay.
None of those things do it. The autoimmune diseases, which we talked about the other day, are the principal cause of damage to the small intestine. And autoimmune diseases and inflammatory bowel disease, like Crohn's disease, those are the major diseases that end up doing this sort of thing. But let's move on now. We said then, where do you get B12?
Animal products.
Animal products. Or you can get it from fish. A small serving of fish once or twice a week is more than enough to give you all the B12 you need. And B12, by the way, is required in the smallest quantity of any of the vitamins. The requirement is less than 100 micrograms per month. A microgram is 1,000th of a gram. And so you need very little of this vitamin to keep you healthy, but you do have to have some. And it is stored in the body to a very minimal extent. All of the water-soluble vitamins, which this is one of, are excreted in the urine, and we don't have a way of storing them in the body. On the other hand, the fat-soluble vitamins are stored well in the liver and in other organs in the body, in the fat of the body. Okay, let's move on then from... I wanted to mention a word or two about toxicity of vitamins, and so I want to mention that B12 is a very safe vitamin, and you can take it in large amounts without any damage to your system. And you can take it in gram amounts rather than micrograms, and it still is well tolerated in the body, and your body just excretes it in the urine, and it's not going to cause you any trouble. Okay, let's move from vitamin B12. Now, the next vitamin I want to talk about are the B vitamins, of which there are 8. And the names of the B vitamins are thiamine is B1.
I'm sorry, can you say that again?
Thiamine, Thiamine. Vitamin B2 is riboflavin, Riboflavin. Vitamin 3 is niacin. Vitamin 5 is pantothenic acid, which is a B vitamin. Vitamin B6 is pyridoxine, which is another B vitamin. And vitamin 7 is biotin. And vitamin 9 is folic acid. We already talked about B12, and so you've had all of the B vitamins with that list. Now, the water-soluble vitamins, which these are, have a number of metabolic functions in the body, and we would be here for 5 days if we tried to talk about all of them. And so we can't do that. So I'm going to just give you a major overview of what these vitamins do and where you get them and whether or not any of them are toxic. Function. The B vitamins help to convert food into energy. They do this in the mitochondria of the cell, and they play a role in muscle contraction. They support the central nervous system, and they are a cofactor for enzymes of many different types. And enzymes are amino acid substances that help chemical reactions to occur more efficiently. So if you have an enzyme, it will expedite a chemical reaction that would otherwise not occur spontaneously. And so the B vitamins act as cofactors in many of these chemical reactions, dozens of different chemical reactions. The most powerful chemical organ in your body is the liver. Every second, a liver cell performs 2 million chemical reactions. Did you hear that? Every cell in your liver 2 million chemical reactions per second. And so it's a chemical powerhouse. It's the largest organ in your body, and it is a powerhouse of chemical activity, and much of that activity is vitamin related. So toxicity from too much of the B vitamins is minimal. There are occasional rare cases that have been cited, but usually those have occurred in people who have taken an overdose of some kind of a vitamin supplement. And so you don't need to worry about getting too much of the B vitamins. Yes?
What does B complex mean?
B complex means all of the B vitamins.
Combined together?
All together. And you can buy those in tablets. But I don't recommend you do that, because taking vitamin supplements has some very real problems associated with it that we're going to come to at the end of this talk. So, deficiency diseases from the B vitamins include a number of disorders. There is one called pellagra, which is due to vitamin B3 deficiency. The macrocytic anemia we've already talked about from B12 deficiency. It can also occur with B9 deficiency. B9 is folic acid. And the folic acid and B12 work together in the manufacture of red blood cells. So you need both folic acid and B12 to make red cells. Now, somebody often asks, when you're talking about B12, cobalamin is the name of the chemical, and the question often comes up, does that contain a dangerous chemical that in the body is turned into cyanide? Because the chemical word for the drug is cyanocobalamin. But there is no likelihood that that will ever occur, because we said that the amount of B12 that is needed is microscopic, micrograms. And that's so small that it would take hundreds of grams of the stuff to cause cyanide toxicity. So that's nothing to worry about. Now, the source of the B vitamins is to a large extent the vegetable family with green and yellow vegetables. And you can get it from whole, unprocessed foods of almost any variety. Whole grains, legumes, fruit, brewer's yeast. Is that the question?
Well, that's what I was going to say. Those are in the cookies.
Yeah. And one of the most potent sources of the B vitamins is kale. Kale is loaded with B vitamins. It's kind of a superfood, in fact. So, minimal toxicity. Okay, let's go from the B vitamins and look at vitamin C. Vitamin C's chemical name is ascorbic acid. Its function is that it promotes the development and growth of connective tissue. Connective tissue has in it cross links in the structure of the protein that are vitamin C dependent. And so if you don't have enough vitamin C, you develop, well, the most serious form of vitamin C deficiency is called scurvy. You've heard of that? Yes. Scurvy has bleeding around the gums, and it's famous for occurring in sailors who were at sea for many, many days without any fresh fruit. The primary source of vitamin C is the citrus family of fruits, but it's also rich in potatoes. It's rich in broccoli, it's rich in strawberries. And so there are lots of different foods where you can get plenty of vitamin C. The toxicity from the substance is minimal. There is a famous doctor who was named Linus Pauling that you may have heard of. Dr. Pauling was professor of chemistry at Stanford University for many years, and he was crazy about vitamin C. In fact, he promoted people taking vitamin C by the tablespoonful. And in fact, he himself would often take several grams of vitamin C a day. The actual amount that you need is a very small amount. And if you ate one piece of fruit a day, you'd get more than enough vitamin C. And so his promotion of vitamin C went nowhere. He got a Nobel Prize because of his work in inorganic chemistry, but he never got any prizes for his work with vitamin C because he was sort of off on the deep end there and was promoting something that never proved to be of any value. So taking large amounts of vitamin C to prevent colds and other viral illnesses is a non-entity. It doesn't work. Okay, any questions about vitamin C? Okay, let's move on to vitamin K. Vitamin K comes in two forms, vitamin K1 and vitamin K2. The work in this vitamin has been done to a major extent in Japan and in the Far East, where vitamin K2 was discovered and a lot of the research done. Vitamin K1, minidione, is a substance that is necessary for the clotting of blood. And if you happen to be on heparin because of to thin your blood to keep you from clotting, then vitamin K will interrupt that activity and your anticoagulant won't work. So if you are using a heparin type of drug to thin your blood, you should not take extra vitamin K1, otherwise your anticoagulant won't work. So that's one of the contraindications to the use of vitamin K. Now, the function of vitamin K2 is quite different than K1. K2 works primarily to promote healthy bones, and it is a major preventer of osteoporosis. In fact, people who have a tendency to get soft bones, which occurs primarily in women, and particularly after menopause, when the levels of vitamin D and other vitamins that we're going to talk about yet are lost and become low. And so researchers in Japan found that if they would give supplements of vitamin K2, they could prevent the osteoporosis from occurring. And there are a number of other drugs that are used to treat osteoporosis. Anybody here on one of those drugs? I am.
Dr. Carl, may I ask you a question regarding the osteoporosis? That means porous bones, correct?
Right, it means soft bones.
Soft bones.
Loss of calcium from the bones.
All right. And I heard a doctor one time tell me that if I drink cow's milk, that it actually depletes the calcium in my body and causes eventually, perhaps, osteoporosis. But I don't know whether that's correct or not.
It's not true.
Okay.
In fact, the most common prescription for cow's milk is because it contains vitamin D that promotes the absorption of calcium.
Okay.
Yes.
My question, though, is in regards to if the vitamin K2 affects the bones in such a way that causes
No, no, no. What?
The
It does
lack
the
of-
opposite of that.
The lack of K2
Yeah.
causes that. Is K involved in any way in the cause of bone spurs or deformities like that?
I don't think so.
Okay.
The research on vitamin K2 is still in its infancy, and we don't know nearly as much about it as we do all of the other vitamins. It's something that has been just recently discovered, and it's a hot subject right now. But there is enough evidence now to show that it certainly does help to prevent osteoporosis and to treat osteoporosis if one already has it. Now there's a whole group of drugs that are called, there are a class of drugs called, you've heard of Fosamax? Fosamax is a drug that promotes calcium deposition in bones and helps to reverse osteoporosis. And there's a whole family of those drugs by several different names. Alendronate is the chemical name for the drug Fosamax. And I'm on that drug because I have some degree of thinning of my bones. And most people who take one of those drugs will have a bone density study that shows hardening of the bones and replacement of calcium in the bones to help correct that problem. Yes?
My mother had osteoporosis, and but she drank a lot of milk and everything, and I'm getting the part with the milk and the vegan and this and that. I am not a milk drinker. I do like cheese and stuff, but I'm getting to what you are saying. So there's these calcium chews. They're like a Tootsie, like a formative of a Tootsie Roll or something. Are those just as good as the K2, or do you recommend?
It's a good question. In other words, if you take extra calcium in some form by mouth, will it do the same thing that K2 does? And the answer is no, it will not. You can take calcium up in quantities up to 2 grams a day or more, and what you'll end up getting is stones in your kidney and other problems that are caused by calcium formation. Calcium is the primary chemical in stone.
Wow.
And so you don't want to take too much calcium. You do need some, and people who have osteoporosis should be on a calcium supplement, but don't overdo it, because it can be, you can take way too much calcium.
Doctor, can't they eat sesame seeds?
Sesame seeds?
That is supposed to help with calcium. Just like how you grind up the flaxseed every day, you can grind up the sesame seeds every day and eat it if you have a problem with your bones. I think that's what we learned when we were at Weimar.
I have heard that, but the scientific evidence supporting that is very thin. It's not very well established. And I would not recommend people doing that on the basis of the current evidence. Any other questions?
What about selenium?
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 That's not a vitamin. That's a trace element, and that's tomorrow's lecture.
And doesn't help to absorb?
No. But that's what we're going to talk about minerals tomorrow.
I had a bone density test
Yes.
a month or 2 ago, and my doctor, she gave me vitamin D, something else with it. I'm going to bring them in tomorrow. But the vitamin D, she said your bones, your density test was not bad, but at your age, it would be good for you to start taking.
So what he was saying is that you have osteopenia, which is the precursor to osteoporosis.
No, that's not what she said.
Well, but that's what she meant. Because if you have a decrease in calcium in your bones, but not enough to call it osteoporosis. We call that osteopenia.
Oh, okay.
Okay?
Now, she didn't say that, but I'm gonna ask her when I go next week. Osteopenia.
Yeah, I learned that because one of my family members, they don't have osteoporosis, but they have osteopenia.
Right.
So they're getting there, but they can try and
That's
work on it.
exactly right. That's exactly right.
Where's how you spell that?
Osteopenia, Osteopenia.
Dr. Carl, my question is regards to the idea of getting adequate calcium, magnesium, vitamin D balance in our bodies. Because I've heard it said that calcium, magnesium are typically assimilated together if it's in the proper amounts. And, okay, I'm talking.
We're coming to vitamin D. We haven't gotten there yet, so just hang on.
I started talking about minerals, sorry.
Okay, so minimal toxicity from the K vitamins. You can't take too much of these vitamins unless you happen to be on a heparin blood thinner, and then you should avoid vitamin K. Okay? And K2 does not affect the clotting system, but K1 does.
What type of vegetables or what can we eat that has adequate amounts of vitamin K in it? Did you say that?
Anything that's green.
Okay, dark green leafy vegetables loaded with vitamin K. Kale, again. Mustard greens, Swiss chard, spinach, broccoli, parsley, Brussels sprouts, green beans, and prunes. All of the above have lots of vitamin K.
Okay, I went through heparin before they put my Coumadin, but
What he's saying is that if you're on a blood thinner of the heparin family or of the Coumadin family, then vitamin K is an antagonist to that kind of treatment. And so you do need to be careful. Now, when you're on one of those kind of blood thinners, you have to take a test from time to time to maintain the blood thinner in the right level. That's
every 4 weeks for 9 hours.
right. That's a prothrombin time. And that test tells you whether the amount of anticoagulant that you're taking is appropriate or whether you need a little more or a little less. Now, there is another type of blood thinner that is now available, which is called a factor 10 inhibitor. And you see those advertised on TV constantly. Apixaban is the one that is the most commonly used. And that does not require blood tests, and it does the same thing in terms of anticoagulation that you get from heparin or Coumadin. So you might want to talk to your doctor about that because it's now covered by Medicare.
Yeah, but I was going to the VA, so it's kind of different.
It's covered by the VA.
Is it?
Yes.
Because she actually asked me if I want, they have that Love Lights, I think, or something like that.
Yes.
But she said you have to go in all the time for tests on that.
No, this one you don't have to have tests at all.
Try to control. Okay.
So a factor 10 inhibitor.
Factor 10 inhibitor.
Yeah.
Dr. Carl, you're talking about water-soluble vitamins.
Right.
And it sounds to me like that the water-soluble vitamins, typically, you can't OD on. You can't get too much of them because it passes out your urine.
Right.
If you have too much that your body doesn't need.
Right.
And so, the oil or the other soluble vitamins, is that an oil soluble?
The fat soluble vitamins, we're coming to those right now.
Okay.
And the first one is vitamin A. Vitamin A functions primarily in the visual apparatus, and the major cause of blindness in the world is vitamin A deficiency. It is necessary for the color vision mechanism and also to some extent for the black and white vision. The sources of vitamin A include yellow vegetables and fruits and fish. Carrots are loaded with vitamin A, and all of the yellow vegetables are. And so you can easily get more than enough vitamin A if you're on a vegetarian diet. Now, fish have a lot of vitamin A also, and so if you eat salmon or some other kind of fish, that certainly is a good source of vitamin A. Okay, let's move on now. What about too much vitamin A? I have patients from time to time who tell me that they're taking large amounts of vitamins. They love vitamin supplements. And if they take any one of the 3 or 4 fat-soluble vitamins in excess, those vitamins are accumulated in the body's fat and in the liver, which are the 2 primary storage places for fat. And these are fat-soluble vitamins, so that means they're fatty vitamins. And so if you take too much of any one of those types of vitamins, you will eventually damage your liver. And I've seen cases of liver failure requiring a liver transplant from too much vitamin A. So don't overdo with any of the fat-soluble vitamins because they can be toxic. Okay, so we said the deficiency of vitamin A causes blindness and is the major cause of blindness in the third world, where vitamin A deficiency is common. Okay, next let's talk about vitamin E. Vitamin E is one of the less well-known vitamins. Its function is to promote muscle function, and also it has some relationship to the visual apparatus. Its source is almost all of the vegetable family have lots of vitamin E, so you're not going to see a deficiency if you eat an adequate amount of almost any plant-based food.
It's for your skin too, right?
Right. And vitamin E is the safest of the fat-soluble vitamins. I don't know of any case reports of damage to the body from too much vitamin E. So the last vitamin we want to talk about then is vitamin D. More has been studied about vitamin D in the last 25 years than any other vitamin. As you all know, fat-soluble vitamins in the form of vitamin D can be made in your skin under the effect of ultraviolet light. So light in the skin makes vitamin D. And if you have 20 minutes of exposure to the sun 2 or 3 times a week, you probably will not become vitamin D deficient. So that's a primary source. However, nowadays, where everybody's scared to death about skin cancer, and we try to shield ourselves from the sun whenever we're outside, and or put on sunblock, there's a lot of vitamin D deficiency, and that occurs particularly as you go north of the equator or south of the equator. The farther you get from the equator, the less direct the sunlight is. And so if you live in the northern latitudes or the southern latitudes, vitamin D deficiency is much more likely to occur. Now, the function of vitamin D is that it promotes bone and muscle and immune system function. All of those are very important functions, and if you don't have enough vitamin D, you become weak, you have marked fatigability, and you will often have loss of hair and loss of bone. And so vitamin D deficiency, I had a good friend who was a dietitian, and she was a good dietitian, and she used to give lectures in the hospital where I worked. And one day she came down with a situation where she was so weak she couldn't take her usual jog. And so she stopped running and she stopped walking. And it turns out that she had a vitamin D level of less than 10 micrograms. Any level below 20 is pathologically low. Pathologic means bad. And so, how do you find out if you have vitamin D deficiency? You have a blood test. And the level of vitamin D, and it's vitamin D3 that we're talking about. And when we hear of D1, D2, and D3, what does that mean? Well, it means that in your body, when you make vitamin D in your skin, it's vitamin D2. And that in turn is hydroxylated in the liver to make the next form of vitamin D, and then the kidneys add another hydroxyl group, and that is vitamin D3. So there's vitamin D1, vitamin D2, and vitamin D3, and they are progressively hydroxylated in the liver and the kidneys for the final vitamin, which is the active form that does all the good stuff in your body. So if you have severe kidney disease, you may not be able to make vitamin D. If you're on dialysis, for instance, or if you have end-stage liver disease, it's very unlikely that it would be severe enough to cause such a low amount of vitamin D formation that you would die from it. But severe liver disease is now a common disorder in the United States. What's the number one cause of liver disease? Alcohol. But what's the next?
Smoking.
No.
Obesity.
No.
Lack of something.
The next most common is hepatitis C. Hepatitis C is the cause of more liver transplants in the United States and the world than any other cause, even more than alcohol. So hepatitis C is a lethal form of liver damage that leads to destruction of the liver and is the number one cause for liver transplantation now in the world. Now, fortunately, hepatitis C can be cured now with very potent antiviral drugs that are curative. And a 12-week course of those antiviral drugs will cure hepatitis C completely. They're very expensive, and a lot of insurance companies don't cover them, but it is available, and those are very effective to get rid of hepatitis C.
Why is it that so many people here in the United States are getting hepatitis C?
Well, the reason that it's so common is that drug use is the way it's passed around. So if you share needles with someone, or if you're in an intimate relationship with someone and have sexual activity, you can transmit hepatitis C that way. So it's very, very common among drug users.
Carl,
Yeah.
will the liver heal itself eventually?
Yes,
Okay.
it can heal. In fact, you can now do a transplant with just one lobe of the liver, which is less than 1/3 of the mass of the liver, put it in a patient, and within 6 weeks it'll be a normal-sized liver. So the liver has an amazing capacity to grow, and it grows only to the size that's needed. Never grows too big. But it has a regenerative capacity that is enormous.
Well, look at the blood that flows through it.
I'm sorry.
Donation that's from a live donor.
Uh-huh.
That comes from a live donor, right?
Well, you can actually have now a liver transplant from a donor where they take only a part of the liver.
But the donor has to be alive.
Yes. Well, no. I mean, they can use the liver from an expired person. I have a daughter who had autoimmune hepatitis that destroyed her liver, and she had a liver transplant, the 6th one that was done on the West Coast at California Pacific Medical Center in San Francisco, and she's now 30 years post-transplant, had 2 girls afterward, and has lived a very good life with a liver that came from a little boy who was killed in an auto accident.
But I mean, don't they keep it alive or some kind of way? I mean, the person can't just be dead and they get.
Well, the liver can be dead for up to 6 or 8 hours.
Oh.
And so the liver has to be transplanted to the place where the transplant is being done by air very rapidly. And the shorter the duration is from the death of the donor to the transplant recipient, the healthier it's going to be. If you go too many hours, the liver will not work very well.
Who's enjoying Dr. Carl's information here? Yay! Awesome. And did you have other things you
No, I'm done.